Ukrainians started assaulting Russian trenches in Bakhmut and Soledar. Could this be the beginning of the counteroffensive, or is it too early to tell? At the same time, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, revealed his version why Russia needs Bakhmut so much. And finally, due to this most recent relative success of Russians in Soledar, they looks like want to seize this opportunity, and now they want to resume the negotiations, but this time it's serious. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first picture comes to us from Dnipro, where according to the local authorities, the cleanup of the debris of the fallen residential building is 90% done. The whole rescue mission lasted for more than 60 hours, and as a result of this, 39 people were able to be rescued from under the debris, but unfortunately 45 Ukrainians are reported lost. Next we go to the territory of Russia, to the region of Voronezh, where recently parts of Ukrainian Tu-141 Strizh drone were discovered. The place where it has been found is more than 250 kilometers away from the front lines, and until now it is still uncertain whether the reason for this fall was a malfunction or the work of Russian air defense system. And speaking about the air defense systems, recently a group of approximately 100 Ukrainian soldiers arrived to Oklahoma, USA to be trained to use Patriot system. In addition to that, right here we have one more video of Ukrainian soldiers training to use another Western vehicle, and this one is M2A2 Bradley infantry combat vehicle. And speaking about Patriot once again, the arrival of this system is expected to be a major turning point in this war, because Ukrainian air defense system will become increasingly superior. Because of this, Ukrainian soldiers might start feeling way more confident performing the counteroffensive, because they will know that their back is secured. The full adoption of the Patriot air defense system is expected to happen in the next several months, and this is exactly where we can see the major changes on the front lines. And if you don't want to miss any of these updates as soon as they start happening, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram, because I want to do a Q&A session, and this will be your perfect opportunity to ask me any question you want. Alright, and now let's continue with couple pretty ridiculous news, followed by a couple of serious ones. First of all, a 16-year-old Russian teenager Nikita Uvarov received 5 years in jail because he threatened to destroy a government building in Minecraft. So just you please let me know in the comments if you think 5 years in jail for this is ridiculous or not. Next we have the statement by Dmitry Medvedev, who is talking about this possibility which is right now being discussed in Davos Economic Forum, whether Western countries should send tanks to Ukraine. His whole quote is pretty stupid and doesn't make sense, so I'll just summarize it for you. And what he basically says is that all these negotiations are ridiculous, and Poland it wants to send its tanks to Ukraine, so later it can use it as an excuse for some reason. So Poland will invade Ukraine itself and take Ukrainian territory. And yes, just like you, I absolutely did not get any logic here. And the third ridiculous statement came to us from the chairman of the Russian State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin. And what he said is that all these people who want to apply to the Russian government positions, it is supposed to be mandatory for them to go to the army before. But here is the major catch. It does not apply to current politicians. And Senior Volodin himself, he never been into the army. And as we transition to more serious statements, here is another news from Ukraine, where recently the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, has resigned. And the reason why it happened, it is because of his statement he made about the situation in Dnipro. What he said is that it was Ukrainian air defense which intercepted Russian missile, and it all fell in the residential building in Dnipro. He faced a severe backlash after this statement, and according to him as an honorable man, the only thing for him left to do was to resign. Alright, and now let's talk about some serious news. First of all, recently the biggest prisoners of war exchange between Russia and Ukraine has been announced. And Russia presented a list of 200 people they want to return back to the homeland, while the list of Ukrainians consists of 800 names. So please you tell me who was the real winner in these negotiations. And the second statement is that according to Natalia Gumenyuk, at this very moment Russians have 6 ships in the Black Sea carrying Caliber missiles. And the total number of Calibers which can be launched can be all the way up to 44 missiles. So for this reason, please be careful in the near future and do not ignore the air raid sirens. Alright, and before I talk about Ukrainians assaulting the trenches of Russians around Soledar and Bakhmut, let me give you a brief general update from the south and from the east. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians continue to accumulate the manpower to the left side of Dnipro River. And at the same time, they continue to develop the logistics between the southern parts of Ukraine and Russia, which most likely means through this Crimean bridge. Next we have several reports about pretty loud noises which were heard recently in Berdyansk. Next we go all the way to the north, to the territory of Russia, Belgorod region, where several explosions were heard in Shebekino and in Valuiki. And speaking about Belgorod, as a result of yesterday's sabotage, where a Russian soldier detonated a grenade inside a military base, the number of casualties has increased to 7 people. Next we go back to Ukraine, where once again, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians continue their offensive in order to regain the lost positions around Svatove, while the main focus of Ukrainians at the end of this highway was next to Kreminna. Speaking about this area, some pretty heavy fighting has been also reported around Novoselyevsk. And as we move down south, some other major combat activities have been reported in Krasnopolivka and to the west of Soledar, in the small settlement of Sil. But one of the major concentration of Russian forces last night has been spotted around Klishchinivka, where they tried to advance closer to this city. And as we move even more to the south, as a result of a failed Russian offensive against Avdiivka, Ukrainians were able to destroy 7 armored personnel carriers of Russians, as you can see from this picture. And even though Russians claim that they are 100% certain that they are successful in Soledar and that the situation around Bakhmut is under their control, we still have reports coming to us from Soledar that there are still separate Ukrainian units inside this city who still show the proper resistance to Russians, at least on the western outskirts of this city. Such as, for example, Magyar unit, about which we talked yesterday, and which was able to destroy several Russian ammunition warehouses with drone strikes. In addition to that, we have the freshest report that Ukrainians actually assault Russian positions and trenches, both in Soledar and in Bakhmut. For example, according to the footage presented to us by the security services of Ukraine, Ukrainians were using drones to attack Russians who were hiding inside trenches around Bakhmut. And then, as a result of a high-precision artillery strike of a Ukrainian 45th Artillery Brigade, 25 Wagner soldiers were eliminated in trenches around Soledar. I'll upload the full version of one of these videos to my Discord, and the second one will be available on my Patreon. And if you want to financially support the channel due to still ongoing demonetization, and also receive hundreds of uncensored photos and videos every single week, the links will be down below. And so yeah, even though these attacks they might not yet feel like the full-scale counteroffensive, this most certainly shows that Ukraine is not ready to give up these 2 cities this easy. And Russians most likely realize this as well. That is why I have a pretty good feeling that right now, as we speak, there are big discussions among Russian elite whether they should continue with this war in Ukraine or claim this victory in Soledar while they still can. And the reason for this is so that they can present this victory to the people of Russia as they were able to successfully achieve one of the main goals of this special military operation. And after this, they'll have a pretty good justification to significantly slow down the offensive or even call it a day. If you remember from my previous videos, I was already making the assumptions that Bakhmut and Soledar will most likely be these trophy cities for Russian government. And recently, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov himself, indirectly confirmed this assumption by saying that Putin needs this victory in Bakhmut so that he can continue his dictatorship regime. There are also constant fights for power within the Putin's inner circle for taking the credit after this victory in Soledar. Such as, for example, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was saying that it was Wagner alone responsible for this success in Soledar. But then the Ministry of Defense of Russia was like, no, Wagner, they did help us, but it was the army of Russia which succeeded in this settlement. And then even the press secretary of Russia, Dmitry Peskov, he said that stop claiming this credit. We are Russia, we're one nation, so we should focus on one goal as a whole nation. And these constant inner conflicts among the Russian elite, they will never allow them to focus on their main goal. And that is why, suspiciously enough, very soon after this relative success of Russians in Soledar, they once again started talking about resuming negotiations, but this time they said they are pretty serious. This all started with the statement of the representative of Russia in the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, who said that Russia is ready to achieve the goals of its special military operations through negotiations. But this time, the conditions were extremely vague, such as, for example, that Russia is ready to talk as soon as there is no more danger to Russia from Kiev, and also as soon as the discrimination of Russians in Ukraine is over. And then this whole idea was picked up by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. And they said is that the ministry requested the direct talks with Ukraine without the third parties. Because according to them, in case there is another country present during these negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, such as for example obviously America will always try to slip its own conditions into these peace talks. So it's it's getting pretty obvious that Russia is looking forward to these negotiations, but it still wants to show that we can accept these negotiations or we might not, let's see. But in reality, the highest government and military officials of Russia, they most likely understand that right now is their best chance to end this all. This week I also have several extremely important special episodes scheduled to be uploaded, and if you don't want to miss them, just please once again subscribe to my channel. It only takes one click. And if you want to support my work due to still ongoing demonetization, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you receive early access to the additional content. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.